You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Yeah, think about it in the context of how we communicate with our consumers. And we recently undertook an effort, what we called the wine event here in the US, which was an AI-generated platform to engage, consumers and largely our friends and family in our community to embrace our brands. And it's just one example and a small example where we're using AI to help generate that experience and to welcome people into our brands and tell our story. And I think about 19 Crimes and the augmented reality that we were early adopters. In fact, the first adopter on with the talking wine labels.
Welcome back to Business of Drinks, where we dig into the strategies and stories behind the most successful beverage brands in the world. I'm Erica Ducey.
And I'm Scott Rosenbaum. Today we're joined by Ben Dollard, President of Treasury Americas. This is the North and South American division of Treasury Wine Estates, home to a powerhouse portfolio that includes brands like DAOU Vineyards, Penfolds, Frank Family Vineyards, Matua, and 19 Crimes, among others.
Yeah, while much of the wine industry is in retreat, Treasury Americas is growing. Net sales revenue rose more than 22% in 2024. That's amazing. And Ben really has led the business through a bold transformation that includes two high-profile acquisitions, Frank Family Vineyards and the luxury juggernaut DAOU, which is now the number one brand in the U.S. luxury wine segment.
Yes, and it's not just about scale and selling. It's about creating a smart culture and structure. Under Ben's leadership, Treasury Americas has created a two-pronged strategy. One pillar that is dedicated to bold, culture-forward brands like 19 Crimes, and another that is focused on estate-driven luxury wines like DAOU and Penfolds. The result is a business that is both deeply premium, but also widely accessible.
Yeah, and Ben also shares how storytelling and brand purpose are guiding every decision, from packaging innovation to AI-driven marketing to how the company supports its distributor relationships. And he's not just growing revenue, as you mentioned, he's building culture. Treasury was a 2024 finalist for Fast Company's Best Workplaces for Innovators, which is a testament to Ben's commitment to both talent and inclusion.
So, whether you're scaling a legacy brand or working to build a category-defining newcomer, this episode is packed with insights on growth, innovation, and leadership in a time of tremendous industry change.
Here's our conversation with Ben Dollard on navigating growth at scale, promoting creativity in wine, and shaping the future of Treasury Americas. Exciting news! Are you headed to Bar Convent Brooklyn on June 10th? If so, come join me and Scott for coffee before the show.
That's right. We'll be hosting the first ever Business of Drinks coffee meetup on Tuesday, June 10th at Gumption Coffee on 39th Street, right next to Industry City.
So swing by between 9 and 10:30 a.m. to say hello, ask questions, and get fueled up before the doors open at BCB. Check out our posts on Instagram and LinkedIn for details, and comment to let us know if you can make it.
We can't wait to see you there. Ben, welcome to the podcast. So happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here as well.
Let's dive right in. Now, for listeners who might, and I'm sure there aren't many, but there might be a few. For those who aren't familiar with Treasury Wine Estates, Can you tell us a little bit about the company, its scope? What are some of the key brands?
Sure. Yeah. Treasury Wine Estates. We're a wine company based out of Melbourne, Australia, but we operate across some 70 countries around the world, including here in the US. And we have a broad portfolio of amazing brands, including Penfolds out of Australia, and of course here in Napa Valley with Frank Family and Beringer and Beaulieu and Stag's Leap, and down in Paso Robles, DAOU. So we operate in, we make wine in a lot of countries around the world, including France and Italy and New Zealand. But we also, have a fairly big footprint when it comes to selling and marketing our brands around the world as well.
Yeah, definitely some familiar names there amongst the wine brands. Um, Tell me a little bit about your background. You are currently the president for the Americas for Treasury Wine Estates. How did you come into this role, and what's your experience?
Sure. Well, I'm Australian, born and bred in Adelaide, Australia, and I have only ever spent my work life in wine. So I studied wine at the University of Adelaide. The business of wine, I might add, although we did make some wine and worked a little bit in vineyards. But I've had the great pleasure of working in this industry my whole career, and it's what I love and it's what I know. And early on, I was asked the question if I'd like to come to the US and spend a year or two working in this market. 29 years later, I'm still here and I love it. And I've been with Treasury Wine Estates for just over 5 years now, and have worked in the wine industry here in the US, worked with Constellation Brands for some 25 years, and now at Treasury just over five, as I mentioned. So I love our industry. I love our interaction with those who love wine, and everything about what we do. Not one bit of it feels like a job.
We are quite fortunate, and that's amazing to hear that background. And so you are your title, president of the Americas, right? It is a very all encompassing title. What does that entail? What's your day to day like? What do you oversee, and what do you kind of focus on?
Yeah, look, we yeah, again, very very fortunate in the responsibility that I have, and the team that I work with. But we have responsibility here, and we talk about the Americas being the whole region in total, from Canada and all of South and Central America, and then here in the US, of course. But my responsibility really does transcend everything from the vineyards and how we manage our vineyards through to how we interact with our consumers and everything in between. So, when I wake up every day, I'm focused on, the development and opportunity for our team, how we think about interacting with our partners around the country. And by that, I mean, our distributor partners, our retail partners, and then most importantly, it's those interactions we have with our consumers, the people who engage with our brands all day, every day. So I get involved in a vast array of different components of our business. The areas I'm most passionate about and that I enjoy the most are those conversations that we have with those people who love our wine, and that's really where I get the stimulation in terms of how I think about our category and the opportunity that lies ahead. But not one day is the same.
I can't imagine so. So you really do oversee things from kind of grape to glass and from grower to consumer and everywhere along the way.
Yep, that's right. Everything in between.
Wow, wow. Well, let's dive into some of the nitty gritty, right? In some of the details I was able to glean. Right, Treasury Wine Estates is really doing phenomenally. For the first half of the 2025 fiscal year, Treasury Wine is up more than 20%. It's a behemoth of a company. We're talking 1.5 billion Australian dollars in revenue, 11 million 9-liter cases in volume. And this is against the backdrop of, the broader wine industry seeing decline, somewhat stagnating. Tell me about this kind of amazing growth trajectory. How are you managing this?
Yeah, I think one of the great uh, you know benefits of our business is that we are operating around the world, and so as we have challenges in one area, other areas might open up and present an opportunity, and that's exactly how we've seen the performance of the business. And you think about Penfolds as a brand that resonates globally. Our opportunity that we've seen in markets like China and throughout Asia is driving a lot of that growth. As we think about our business here in the US, and we've been very fortunate to have acquired two businesses in the last 3 years: Frank family out of Napa, and DAOU more recently in Paso Robles. So, we're always thinking about the engagement with our consumer and how we think about, embracing that. And so, as we think about growth and nurturing our brands, it's always with anticipation of what's around the corner. And so that's how we think, and we're certainly not adverse to market conditions and what's happening out there, but we are also thinking about how do we just continue to engage in a really meaningful way with those people who love our wine.
Yeah, along those lines, when you think of driving growth and really pushing these brands that come from many different countries across many different price points, is there some overarching principles or general tactics, or is it different from brand to brand for Treasury Wine Estates? Do you grow DAOU differently than you grow Matua? How do you think about tactics for growth?
Yeah, I mean, it's something certainly our team that we think about a lot, and we certainly value and put a lot of emphasis on the purpose of each brand, and what each brand stands for, and the history and the origins of each brand, and so that's a big priority for us. So absolutely, as we're thinking about opportunity, then we think about the purpose of the brand, and how we how that brand has really resonated and built a loyal following. So we spend a lot of time really unpacking that. And I think it's a really interesting part of our job, actually, as we think about the role that a brand like DAOU would play, around a dining room table or at a barbecue, versus Matua that might, be a very different occasion, but still the same sort of enjoyment. So as you think about a portfolio our size, it can be quite a little bit overwhelming when you think about all of these brands together. But then once you start really determining the intrinsic value behind each of them and what they stand for, I think it actually becomes quite clear kind of how we think about communicating.
Fair. Yeah. If we zoom in on DAOU, for instance, right? This is as I understand, the number one brand in luxury. We're putting that at $20 plus, right? Segment. Right. That is tremendous. How does DAOU how do you like to differentiate it in a world where there are a lot of luxury wines, right? What makes DAOU special, and how do you think of the evolution of differentiation in a world where there's a lot of expensive wines vying for consumer attention?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's always been a lot of choice, and experience would suggest that as people come into wine, and the idea of experimenting and exploring and discovering and all those things is just part of the world that we live in. And so I think about a brand like DAOU, and coincidentally, and it's exciting for me. I just had dinner with George DAOU on Monday night, actually down in Monterey, and so it reminded me we've owned the brand now for a little over a year, and speaking to George, and the fact that lot of the team from DAOU are now a part of our broader organization. It just reminded me, he talks a lot about being purpose-led and having a purpose behind your brand and having the brand really have a close relationship with the consumer. And that's exactly what DAOU has done. It really has, opened a whole world of consumers who just love engaging with the brand because it's a little bit different. If you go to DAOU Mountain and the music's playing and the sun's out, and it feels like it feels more like a party than it does a tasting experience, and that's really what has put DAOU on the map. And so I really do think that the ability to continue to have one consumer who loves DAOU tell their friend about it, and their friend and their family, and that's exactly how DAOU has grown. And so our task and opportunity that lies ahead is to continue that. It's a lot about bringing the experience to life.
And to that end, I'm fascinated by the intersection, the interaction between kind of brands and wineries when they're acquired and the acquirer. Can you speak to what maybe did Treasury learn in the acquisition of DAOU from DAOU, and maybe the other way? What do you think maybe DAOU has learned in working with a Treasury?
Yeah, look, it's a really great thought, and certainly something that we, as we were looking and building a relationship with George and Daniel DAOU and the team at DAOU, is really very important part of any process of acquiring something. Is how do we really combine our businesses and take the best of both, and that was a principle that we adopted early on in terms of how do we make sure that we protect the alchemy, that exists at DAOU. And I talk about alchemy, none of it is by chance. It's, George and Daniel had a vision and a dream, and they pursued that. And it's still a fairly young brand. So, we have great history as a company of taking brands and really establishing them and making sure that they remain true to what they stand for. And so, as I think there's a long list of things that we could talk about as we bring in a brand to the portfolio, but the most important one is to protect what has made it so special, and for the consumer not to notice for 1 second that anything has changed. Only their experience gets enhanced, and that they continue to love the wine. And then on the other side, I think bringing a brand like DAOU into a business like ours just gives the opportunity for us to think about expansion. For example, we have a tremendous amount of expertise around the world. So, how do we take a brand like DAOU and ensure that it's on, kitchen tables, dining room tables, in bars and restaurants, not only here in the US and Paso Robles and California, but really anywhere around the world where people love wine. And so that's where the real win-win comes in as we think about this opportunity. But the most important thing is just continuing to be true to what the brand stands for.
Fair, yeah. Is that do you find that difficult in presumably the goal is to scale these brands, grow them. Is it difficult to stay true while growing, and if so, what lessons might you apply from other times that's been done?
Yeah, look, I've been really excited for our company and for the team here that when we acquired Frank Family, beautiful brand up there in Calistoga, and two and a half, 3 years into that, I just couldn't be more excited that Rich and Leslie Frank are as engaged today as they were when they owned the brand. Todd Graff and Liam, our two leaders at the winery, are there and thriving, and continue to make incredible wine, and continue to tell amazing stories. So, in that regard, I think there's a wonderful recipe that we can lean on and leverage, but at the same time thinking about how do we grow the brands. And I think that's where a company like us can come in and really think about how do we grow it the right way. and access to our vineyards and our broader footprint. All of those elements play an important role as we think about growth, but we're not going to compromise what has made these brands so special. And I think that's really, really important because growth is one thing, and protecting and maintaining the magic is another, and we just got to make sure that the two go hand in glove.
Yeah, yeah, that's a careful balance. I'm sure. I'm
Yeah.
sure. You know, if I were to crack open, to take a different line of thinking, uh, wine marketing textbook, if such a thing, I could get my hands on one. I'm sure it would say something like, provide a entry level commercial wine to a consumer that you can then trade them up as they mature, as in their journey with beverage. I'm curious though, in this kind of volatile time, if in the Treasury Wine Estate portfolio you find consumers doing kind of that assumed behavior, starting kind of at the bottom with regard to price point and working their way up, or are you finding that maybe they're discovering wine at different price points and different brands than we might typically assume?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's really prescriptive, and I think there's no doubt these are interesting times, and the way I think about it from even in my own experience in my own career is that we're here for a moment in time in terms of the influence we can have over our brands, and thinking about a brand like Penfolds that's been around for over 150 years. My goal is that DAOU in 150 years has the same level of acceptance and love around the world. And so, I think there's no doubt there's an opportunity for us to continue to demystify, what wine is all about, and I think that's at all levels of the chain. When you think about somebody coming into wine for the first time, who doesn't have a great sense for what it tastes like or where it's from or the story behind it, or somebody who's been enjoying wine for a long time. And so the way we're thinking about that as a company is that we're creating effectively two pillars in our business. One is going very much designed around how we think about engaging the new consumers into our business, and so we call that our bold brands division, with very much the intent to think through how do we unlock and create some excitement for a consumer who's coming into the category for the first time, irrespective of age or demographic, whatever. It's just more how do we share this magic of our industry, but maybe in a different way. So we're thinking about innovation in a really deliberate fashion. Then the other side of how we're thinking about the business is the development of our estate wines. So DAOU and all of our properties in Napa, Penfolds from Australia, and how do we just really tell those stories? So, I'm in the backdrop of an industry or a category that, there's it's well documented. I actually think, wine's been around a long time. It's going to be around a lot longer. And I think just as we think about the role it plays in a good civilized life and a happy life and a connected life, it's going to play a really important role in the future. And so it's just how do we nurture those stories, and how do we present ourselves in the best light? Is the way I think about it.
It's a really elegant model, kind of this kind of bold brands, right, for folks who might be encountering it, and then the estate portfolio. um do you find there is do folks, do consumers, right, travel between those portfolios? Do you see, one type of consumer gravitate toward one and then another the other, or is there kind of a melting pot across the catalog, as it were?
Yeah, I think the lines are blurred, and I believe that it's just like reading a good book or listening to great music. right? That you might, depending on the mood you're in, you might explore different avenues, and I think wine plays that same role depending on the occasion, or if somebody brings a bottle to your house that you've never tried before, or a varietal or a flavor that you're excited to try it. So I think the exploration happens at all levels, and I think there's a curiosity that exists in our business that is really unique. And I think as people in our industry, we're so lucky because invariably wherever we make wine, it's some of the most beautiful parts of the world, and so bringing those stories to life conjure up an imagination that I think is really tantalizing for our consumers. And so I think it is kind of blurred in terms of, and it's not prescriptive in terms of how we think about engaging.
Am I fair in assuming that 19 Crimes is in the Bold portfolio? Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
that's good assumption.
So, this is a brand that I'm personally fascinated by. It's what I would describe, and these are my words, right? It's very culture forward. Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart represent the brand. It's the official wine of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, right? Because of how it's positioned this way, is the way in which you think of marketing it and growing a brand that is so culture forward different from something like an estate brand like Penfolds?
Yes, for certain. And as we think about a brand like 19 Crimes, it's the idea it's good to be bad, and you think about what that means, and the relationship that we have with Snoop. That relationship is a great example where his community, as he refers to his community, is those people who he feels a really tight connection with. That opened up a whole new world to us, and we were able to engage with his community and talk to his community, I think, in a really authentic way. And the wine style that was developed in conjunction with him, really resonated. And so, and the same with as we thought about the relationship with Martha Stewart, or we do what we call the limited time offers, and we do things around Halloween and other holidays where we can just engage and be different. And how we think about that, or the UFC relationship, we really want to be where our consumers are and where we know people who love the brand are going to be. So the approach there is very different to how we might think about Frank for a Cause, where we're very much working with Frank family and elevating a cause that has existed with Frank family since the inception of the brand. But two very different approaches to marketing and how we think about bringing the brands to life. But not one is better than the other. It's just a different approach.
Like, to that end, right? I think of 19 Crimes as a fun brand. When I think of any corporation, large or small, I don't necessarily think fun is the decision making process that drives a fun brand like 19 Crimes. Is it different tactically at Treasury, or is there a team of a similar size working on that brand versus another brand, or is it a more of a singular decision and kind of purposeful thinking coming from one person?
It's not, these ideas are never generated typically from one person. I think they, as a business, and the great opportunity from where I sit is that, we create and enable ourselves to have the space to explore, and our decisions that we make and think about. And so, if you think about, okay, how did the idea of Snoop Dogg come up with 19 Crimes? And so, was that just one person? And did someone go away and get tasked and then come back and here's the idea? No, it's really understanding the brand, and understanding the feedback we get from our customers, and then understanding how does that keep evolving, and how does it keep moving with time? So a group of our teammates will go away and come forward with a raft of ideas and thoughts, and that's exactly how the Snoop engagement came about. And the same on our luxury side of our portfolio, brand like DAOU. It's just how do we cultivate the energy of our team, all of whom have amazing ideas, and then how do we make some decisions on which ones we're going to get after? And the Snoop 19 Crimes relationship's a good example of that, where we had real conviction that there was the nucleus of a good idea. We had a partner who was incredible and continues to be incredible in terms of engagement. And so, to me, it's more about having the appetite to go explore, and then to be able to persevere with that exploration, because sometimes, we don't have a lot of patience and we want to move on to the next thing. And but it's important to stay the course.
Absolutely, absolutely. I often joke that the drinks business, in particular, beverage alcohol, is one where, particularly if you're a supplier, you have to sell the brand and then sell it again and sell it again. You're always doing the selling, even though there are distributor partners and retail partners. When it comes to that kind of game of telephone, how does Treasury Wine Estates think about giving its distribution partners, its retail partners, the best tools possible? How do you pass on the DNA of these brands that you so firmly understand to others who might not be familiar?
Yeah, it's a really important thought, and it does start with your own belief and your own conviction. And one of the biggest and best tools that we have is the ability to experience these properties firsthand. Now, clearly, that's not available to everybody, and so how we bring these experiences to life, out in the marketplace, that's equally as important. But we have a very strong code internally, around how we think about DNA and the role that all of our teammates play. And we talk about bringing our whole selves. That's very much a core of who we are, and it's not corporate speak. It's not anything but when we show up every day, we want to be transparent and honest, and give it our all. And so, we would expect the same of how we think about our partnerships with our distributors, and the value they see in our brands, and the value that they see in terms of representing our brands. We value tremendously the deep, long-lasting relationships we have, and a company like ours that has acquired brands, we care deeply about those partnerships, and so it really is conviction in how we feel about the brands, and believing in the brands, and then making sure that that passion and enthusiasm carries through ultimately to consumer. But the best tool that we have is the ability to show everybody our amazing properties. So, for anybody who might be willing and able, I would love to extend an invitation to come out and see us, because it's the best way, for sure.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you. Someone will take you up on that, I am sure.
Good.
Hordes of business of drinks listeners are going to be contacting you.
That's okay.
Go back to, I was doing a little research and I read a great interview you gave with Wine Industry Advisor last year, and you said something that was very prescient and very relevant to today. You said, quote, "The AI revolution is reshaping marketing and our ability to tell stories, provide value, and create unique online experiences." I'm curious, how does Treasury Wine Estates employ AI to grow its business and connect with consumers?
Yeah, look, we firstly, I'm really, really excited for our business on how we might think about, embracing, technology and AI, and how we think, doing so in a really authentic fashion. Because at the end of the day, we're an agricultural business, and our history is really deep, particularly when it comes to the communities we're operating in. So think about it in the context of how we communicate with our consumers. And we recently undertook an effort, what we called the Wine Event here in the US, which was an AI generated platform to engage, consumers and largely our friends and family in our community, to embrace our brands. And it's just one example and a small example where we're using AI to help generate that experience, and to welcome people into our brands and tell our story. And I think about 19 Crimes and the augmented reality that we were early adopters. In fact, the first adopter on with the talking wine labels. That was just I think a step as we think about the role that technology can play. And again, a lot of it is about how we tell our story, and how we be really smart about that and take out any complexity and the confusion that can sometimes exist around our business. But just to make it, I come back to the idea of being really deliberate about our purpose. Like what is the purpose of each of these brands, and what do they stand for? And most every one of them have a founder, and that story. And so, just how do we tell it in a really relevant way? And I just think AI is going to help us do that, and is already helping us do that as we think about communicating with our consumers.
I'm so glad you share that. I was just looking at an infographic that talked about the way that AI is being used, and I think a lot of people think from a business perspective it's just used to create, but the way that most consumers use it is to connect. It's the number one
Connect.
use this year is therapy and companionship, and that sounds like our business all tied up in one big bit. Um, have you seen over the course of the last 12, 18 months more engagement with some of these tools from the consumer perspective? Are people using AI more to connect with your brands?
Yeah, I think, look, it's evolving at a really rapid pace, and how we engage. You hit the nail on the head, which is that idea, of connection, and the idea that authenticity and truth really matter. Then AI can help us, you know be a bridge to how we think about that connection, and the ability at your fingertips to be able to engage and to tell our story. But it's exactly as you just said. It is truly about this connection, and so we're inquisitive, by nature, and we'll explore. But I come back to is really key driver of how we think about our business, which is around the purpose, like why, what is driving us. And so as we adopt AI or any technology or any new way of engaging, we want to do so in a really authentic fashion.
Yeah. Interesting. Um, I'm curious, when I think of Treasury and its brands, I'm happily delighted that a brand like Matua, which is a wine brand from New Zealand, it's enjoyed a lot of success over the years. But one of the new things that I've seen is this kind of quote lighter Sauvignon Blanc that you all launched. And for listeners, this is a lower ABV version of its flagship offering. Um, Ben, can you share with me why and how you're building this brand that is, for me, a little different from so much of the rest of the portfolio?
Yeah, it is. It is, and we have spent a lot of time just again in conversations with our customers and with our consumers as we think about excuse me, just where we're going. And it became clear to us that the idea of a Sauvignon Blanc, that's fresh and delightful and vibrant and all of those things that come with New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, that the time and place that people were enjoying it is exactly where we wanted to be. But also the idea of lighter, its origins really came about around the fact that how do we continue to engage, not necessarily full alcohol, and but just it's exactly as we put it on the label. It's just lighter. And we were debating what to call it at one point, and we just like, well, let's just call it what it is, and it's just a lighter style, still with the same flavor, the same experience, but it just allows you, to have something that's, just a little bit more refreshing in that regard. So, It didn't happen by chance. It happened because we were talking to our consumers of Matua who were telling us when they enjoy it, and I do think there's a real opportunity for us as a category to continue to explore these opportunities, and to make sure that we're being really sensitive to what the consumer wants, and that's exactly where Matua Lighter came from.
Is it resonating with any particular demographic or psychographic? I know there's a lot of concern in the wine world that consumption trends are changing across generations, or is that not the case?
Look, I think consumption changes all the time, and tastes evolve, and as people mature through their wine experience, so too does the trends that we see. So, to me, Matua Lighter is just a natural evolution in the development of a brand like Matua, and there's no doubt the experience. And I'm just looking out here today, beautiful, beautiful day here in Northern California, not a cloud in the sky. And the idea of just having a light, white, refreshing wine, it's all about the right occasions. And so I don't chalk it up to, tastes are changing materially, other than, just making sure that we're talking to our consumers what they want. Again, over the last 30 years I've been involved in the industry, certainly things change all the time. So it's just being well connected. I think it's important.
Absolutely. In terms of connection, is there a particular area that you find, and I'll provide examples here, but so much of, I think, the trouble that the industry can have in evolving is maintaining an awareness of what's going on, and that's often because the three-tier system in the United States purposely pushes the supplier away from the end user. Do you learn the most from talking to your distributors, to talking to directly to consumers, a combination? How does Treasury garner an idea of where things are going when it comes to changing trends?
Yeah, it's a great thought. Now, I'll say a couple of things. The thing I really appreciate and enjoy about working for a company that is in a lot of countries around the world is that we get a well of feedback. Be it how consumers are enjoying Penfolds in China, or how a group of friends are enjoying DAOU on a Friday night in Houston, Texas. So you can just glean all of these pieces of feedback. I'd say, as a group of wineries, we get about 400,000 consumers coming through our wineries every year here, just here in the US. Um, so that presents just this incredible opportunity to have a conversation. And so I would say that, and now they're in an environment where clearly they're very interested to learn more. So we use that as a very rich resource of information, and our teams are really well equipped to provide the feedback on what they're thinking and how they're feeling, and all of those things. So I'd say that one, and then absolutely. Having the right type of relationship with those who have the keys to the consumer retailers around the country, our distributors, and having the right level of conversation about the right things is something that we pursue with great rigor, just because it really is important to get the feedback, and feedback is a gift, and it's important. But we've got all of these different areas that we can go to as a source, and I think it's a really big part of how we're thinking about the future.
I love that point, essentially, right? That the tasting room, or the cellar door, as it were, right? So many people think of it strictly as a selling opportunity, but to use it as a learning opportunity is, if you're not doing that, you're missing out.
Sure, and it's again, we've got people who've taken the time and effort, often travelled a long way to come join us, and I think as an industry we do a great job of providing amazing hospitality, but it's just how do we keep improving on that and learning from it.
Yeah. I'm curious. We've had a pretty happy and cheerful conversation, and I don't want things to turn too dark. But I'm curious from a business perspective. Is there anything that keeps you up at night? Is there anything that you're like, this is a pressing issue either for Treasury or the industry at large?
Yeah, I look. Of course, there are things that keep me up at night, and I'm sure my colleagues as well. But I I I care a lot, and we care a lot about making sure that our brands and our stories are well nurtured for the future. And so I feel the same way about our team, right? And you've talked about it a couple of times, with a backdrop of a category that is, lots of commentary out there on our category. I want to make sure that we have a platform and an environment for our team where they can thrive, and then when they can learn. And for me, when I first came into the industry as a young kid out of university, I could only have imagined the environment that wine was going to enjoy over the next 30 years. Well, I think it's our job to cultivate that for the next generation, and so I worry about that in terms of just how we do that. But again, I know we have an amazing team here, and the whole industry is full of amazing people. So just making sure we continue to have an industry that's incredible to work at is an area that I spend a lot of time thinking about. And then clearly, just how do we continue to make wine a really important part of people's lives, where you can be with friends and family and just enjoying what is otherwise a stressful life. How do we make it a little less stressful? And I think that's a really important role that wine plays. And so continuing to cultivate that, to me, is something I stay up at night about thinking about, but I don't get too worried about it.
That's good. That's good. And yeah, it is interesting, right? Because wine can be stressful for consumers in a way that so many other things that they might buy at the supermarket might not be, right? They're not giving a second thought to what ice cream they're picking up, but they're fretting over whether they're picking the right varietal for dinner for the party, right?
For
Um,
sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's like a lot of things in life. Yeah, it can be a bit confusing and overwhelming. And you were talking a little bit before about YouTube and the where you go for your source of information. I think wine, it's what's going to make you stop and take a minute to pause and think about it. I think we can take any confusion out of wine. That just makes it more approachable. And again, it's all about that feeling of belonging and having purpose.
I'm curious with all the experience you have and with all the data and all the things you see and all the wines in the portfolio. Is there any predictions or any way in which you see the beverage industry or wine industry evolving over the next few years? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely it's evolving, but it has been evolving for a long time, and tastes become more sophisticated at certain levels, but then they become really inquisitive at other levels. So I think about positioning us and really cultivating this group of amazing estates that we have, and I think they have a very bright future for a long, long period of time. And so it's just how do we make sure we keep doing the right thing. And then on the other side is thinking about new and exciting, and developing 19 crimes as an example, or what's that next idea we don't yet know about, and what's that next idea the consumer doesn't yet know about, and so how do we bring those two things together and make them come in sync, and so as we think about the future and trends, and I think flavor and taste and quality is always going to be really paramount. But how we think about expanding the occasions where wine isn't today that could be tomorrow, that are the things that are on our mind. Um, and as people have a plethora of choice, how do we think and make sure that wine is a part of that consideration set?
Yeah. Well, we like to always end these conversations and try to glean perhaps a source of inspiration for our listeners. So the question I have is, a drinks entrepreneur ask you for a book, a movie, online class, a person to follow on Instagram or LinkedIn. This doesn't have to be related directly to wine or drinks, but um, who or what do you recommend provide, insight or inspiration to this budding entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's I've thought a little bit about this, and I'm not sure there's a book or a business magazine that I necessarily you know would say front and center for me for a budding entrepreneur. But I've had the really good fortune of engaging with a couple of people whose businesses we bought, both of whom were budding entrepreneurs at some point. And that's George Dow and Rich Frank, and both of their careers are well documented, and both led them to wine, but not with a intimate understanding of our industry, and that's what I love about them both. And as we think about, Rich Frank, who was president of Disney and Paramount, came up through that movie world, and now created a winery because he loved it. I think it's a very powerful story, and again, well documented. If you wanted to go read about Rich, I find his story incredibly inspiring because he was an entrepreneur in our industry. And then George Dow also, because he wasn't a traditional wine guy, bucked a lot of trends, and really thought, okay, well, if the industry does it that way, I'm going to do it this way. So I think the two of them, as I think about somebody coming into our industry or someone looking to explore wine, those two are very inspirational to me.
Well, thank you for those recommendations, and thank you for joining us on Business of Drinks. Ben, it was a pleasure to have you with us.
Oh, it's been wonderful to be here, and thanks for giving me the opportunity.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Is your drinks brand looking to start or expand import and distribution?
Whether you're seeking to enter new markets or you're unhappy with a current distributor and desiring a better fit, you should know about Swig Partners.
Founded by industry experts Eric Siegelbaum and Amy Troutmiller, Swig takes the guesswork and the legwork out of distribution strategy. Swig helps brands and distributors find the right fit for long-term relationships and sales success.
US-based importers and distributors should reach out too. With Swig, they can explore new products for free. And brands? You can get $100 off by mentioning Business of Drinks. Find out more at swigpartners.com/business of drinks. That's swigpartners.com/business of drinks.
Well, welcome back to Last Call. This is Caroline Lamb again, and I'm joined by Scott and Erica. I've been thinking this week about how working in the drinks industry and that being basically my whole life, it's what I'm passionate about, it's what I work in. Sometimes it just gets a little bit redundant, and so when something exciting breaks through the normal pattern, I want to talk about it. So today we are going to talk about the most memorable wine, spirit, or cocktail that each of us have had this year. And for me, I am lucky enough to taste hundreds of wines every month in my job. And so again, when something breaks through that pattern, I definitely stop and take note. So recently, I tasted a wine called Domaine de la Sarraziniere. Please pardon my French, literally. And it was a cuvée called Claude Seigneuret. This is a wine from Macon Boussier, and it's through an importer, a very small importer based in Chicago called Loci Wines. This company started by someone named Randall Bush, who had a long career with Rosenthal Wine Merchant, and he started his own company. And I believe he's really just distributing in the Chicago area, Michigan, and a little bit in Indiana. Anyway, I mentioned that because after tasting this wine, which was 100% Chardonnay, from the Maconnais, you got so much beautiful brightness. You could tell it was the sunshine of the Maconnais in the wine, but also like just it had this quality to it that I just couldn't get my hands around, which like, a lot of times you taste a wine, it's incredible, but you totally understand it. It's what you were expecting. This wine I was not expecting. It had a real energy to it, and it made me go and start tasting some other wines from this small portfolio. It's just French and Italian wine, and they all had this like intangible quality to them that I was super drawn to. And, I wasn't around when Kermit Lynch got his start, but I imagine this is how people felt when they were like, oh, wow, I taste these wines by this man. He handpicked them and they have this energy and I love them and I trust him now. That's how I'm starting to feel. So loci, the whole idea of it, I think is Randall has published online that he imports what he calls neoclassical wines. So the new classics, if you will. A lot of the producers are quite young, but they're making really classic style wines. And, full disclosure, I do sell these wines in the state that I'm in. But they're having this interesting effect on the market because they're in a portfolio with a lot of other wines from the same areas that are made in the same classical ways. And a lot of times his wines are a touch even more expensive than the ones that we have, but they truly have this exciting quality to them that kind of just, it gives you the context of real wine and real people that I think he's really onto something in terms of things that I'm interested in, which are real wines and real people. And he's giving that to us. So anyway,
I'm getting thirsty listening to this. No, it sounds electric. Yeah, Caroline, like I was listening to the writer comedian John Hodgman, and he said like we suffer from the tyranny of our own expectations, something to that effect.
yeah.
And like, yeah, it sounds like this wine really subverted your own. And I know with me, that was one of my favorite drinks of the year. It was this cocktail from Yacht Club in Denver, Colorado, called the Coffee Negroni. And this is a cocktail by owner and bartender McLean Hedges. And it is a riff on the Negroni. It is 1 part Plantaray coconut rum instead of gin, right? It's half a part Campari. It's 1 part Mr. Black Coffee liqueur. It's half a part 10-year-old Verdejo Madeira and a dash of saline solution. And let me tell you, it bowed me over. This is a cocktail that is like a cover song that is better than the original. It is Aretha Franklin's Respect. It's Johnny Cash doing 9 Inch Nails' Hurt, right? It is, I didn't think you could improve on the Negroni, and this is all of that and more. So it is bitter, it is sweet, it is complex, it is savory. It has Madeira, which of course I love, and me and my dining companions were fortunate to try probably half the cocktails on the menu, and this by far was the best on the menu and the best I've had all year. It's one that I am going to buy 1 or 2 ingredients so I can recreate this at home.
I love that because, I think what you both highlighted is like, these are the things that make us so excited about working in wine and spirits. When you have these aha moments and you're just like, oh my gosh, that liquid bowled me over. I was just transported. I was taken to another place, all those things. And I had a similar experience. So I recently was going to a collector dinner at like one of these BYOB restaurants in Chinatown. And, people were bringing like O'Brien from like the 80s and Brunello's from the 70s and like all these beautiful Barolos and like, incredible wines. And like, I do not have a very deep cellar. So typically what I will do is represent the rare side of the wine selections. And I'll go, and I love doing this. This is one of my favorite things. I'll go to, wine shops around the New York area. This time I happened to go to Dandelion Wine in Greenpoint, and I found a truly incredible wine. This is Domaine Economou. Antigone Red Blend 2004. And this is a wine from Crete, a red wine from Crete, from one of the most, artisanal and sought after producers in that area, Yanis Economou. And this wine, I was looking at it online because this is a $185 wine. And I was like, am I really going to spend that? So I went online and I'm looking for research on this wine. And I saw one review that called it an orgy wine. This is the wine you should take to an orgy. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll have what she's having. Thank you, Meg Ryan. We're going to wrap this up right here. I got that wine, and I must say it did deliver. All of the collectors at the table were taking photos of this wine and talking about how much it blew them away. And it's from 90-year-old Laitico vines with also a little bit of Mondolari. Those are the grapes. So indigenous grapes from Crete and from Greece. And this wine, it drank truly like a Barolo. I mean, it was ethereal, like an aged Barolo. And just with that clarity and precision, it was one of the best wines I've had in some time. And I have to say, this is the wine I would take to an orgy. So there you have it.
I'm going to end this call before we go any further than that. So thank you again for joining us on the Business of Drinks. Please follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you are listening. Tap the notification button so you're the first to know when a new episode drops. And please make sure you rate us in our star ratings and share us out on social. It really helps us to find new listeners. Finally, if there's something you'd like us to cover on the podcast, please send us a message either in our email at podcast@businessofdrinks.com or on Instagram or LinkedIn, where we are very active. So until next time, and let us know if you try any of our suggestions.